All right. Says we're going live.
Cool. Who's in, or how are we introducing today? Kate, maybe that could, Kofi's not here to jump in.
You might show in the next 2 minutes, though. That's kind of his style.
He'll bring in that burst of energy.
But I can do it if not. We're going first.
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I need to bring up the actual thing so I can get questions.
I'm just gonna tidy up my studio for a bit while people are arriving because it's a bit of a mess.
Oh, those are great plants, though. That's big monstera.
Need some plants for this office. Well, I suppose when I move out of my other office, I'll bring plants here.
Yeah, you could do plants in that office for sure.
One of the few people who has like 2 sets of windows in this building. I've got a corner.
Where is everybody today? Or where is everybody calling in from?
Oh.
I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
We got 2 Brooklyners. Or are you in Brooklyn, Jess?
I am in Brooklyn. Yeah. This is my house in Brooklyn, right next to the Lorimer L. You should come over. I'm planning on putting more plants in my house this week. That's actually one of my goals. So is buying more plants for my house. So yeah.
I'm in Sheffield.
I'm in The Hague, as in see you in The Hague.
Cool. Well, it's now gone 9. Should we get started?
Okay.
All right. Yeah, welcome to day 2 of hybrid interfaces live coding. We're gonna start with a smaller group this morning that is just titled Voice. And I believe, Melody, you're gonna start. So I'll let you take it away.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Hello, good morning. My name is Melody. I'm broadcasting here from Brooklyn, New York. It is 9 a.m. and this is going to be as lightning as a talk as I can do. So this is our second day of HLCI. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to share or talk about for today, I just thought a lot about how much I was enjoying myself and how all the various topics that were being presented inspired me. Late last night when I should have been sleeping, I found myself thinking about what people had saying and we're discussing, like the subjects revolving around identity and education in the future and whatnot. And so that's kind of like a starting point for what I'm gonna just talk about today. This is like I consider this a small glimpse into my multimedia brain, someone who spends too much time on their phone. This is also part stream of consciousness diary. Thinking about this might be a form of public thought. This is also part list. I'm a millennial, I love lists. And this would be a rose-colored glasses addition, right? Because I don't, I'm usually a little bit more critical, but right now I'm feeling a lot of love and positivity. And that's what we're going to stick at for a bit, which isn't to say you can't be critical with love. But moving on, I'm just going to focus on voice for this bit. The first presentation or first section of presentations today is about voice. And so thinking about what that means to me, voice is an important part of my artistic practice. I have lots of personal beginnings related to voice. I was in a choir as a kid. So X amount of years ago, I would be singing in Christmas carols in costume for money. And this was my pre-computer days. And so thinking about electronics and voice still before live coding, I think about Carl Stone. In this performance I saw at Issue Project Room, where I watched him remix a vocalist and woodwind instruments live. Carl Stone's like a heavy Maximus P user. And so something that I found later was this article where he discusses live coding. Like someone asks him, like, what do you think about people who do live coding, like Algorave type things? And, he says it's an interesting idea, but he doesn't consider himself like a live coder, which I also think is interesting. Anyway, I recommend checking out that article and his music. Something that I like is his live vocal sampling. Shows a lot about is a huge representation of process music, watching like that original source and watching it being transformed and hearing it being transformed. And I think a lot about that a lot when I'm thinking about live coding. So that's something that draws to me. And so at this point, I'm recommending you check Carl Stone out if you haven't. And so moving on, thinking about another personal point, person who's inspired me, Laurie Anderson. So, Oh Superman for Forever. So when I'm doing what I'm doing, I think a lot about her work and her, how badass she is and innovative. And so if you haven't heard her work, I recommend checking her out. And so now at this point, we're actually going to talk about like live coding. So here's a shout out to other live coding artists, voice artists. I want to shout out to Messica Arson, someone that I saw live coding in Sonic Pi when I first started live coding. I watched them do live vocal looping by using Audacity, so dragging and dropping audio recorded from Audacity into Sonic Pi, and I found that super inspiring. I would try to imitate that by recording the audio in Sonic Pi, outputting it, and then dragging and dropping it from the Finder into my own application. And so I want to shout out to them, and they're probably going to talk about their album later in their presentation. So I'm going to stop talking about their work so they have more to talk about, but they're great. I want to shout out to Mei Chung of Scorpion Mouse. This is an article from Top Lap that they wrote, the burgeoning live code scene in New York City. When I think about them, I just think about someone who's been really supportive. I think about, they no longer live in the city, they moved away and are starting a family with their partner. And so I think a lot also about, changes in adulthood and being a mother. When I think about them, and I admire them a lot for maintaining a practice. I think about Dearful. I want to shout out to them. Something that I thought was interesting is Spotify suggested them to me before I started live coding. So I was already listening to them. And then one day I went to YouTube and realized they were live coding this entire time. So shout out to them. I want to shout out to Abigail. I really enjoy their work. They presented yesterday and discussed their work involving shamanism and live coding, and also expressed trying to figure out the middle point of their work of spirituality, identity, and their electronic arts practice. I highly recommend checking out that talk if you didn't get to see them speak. I appreciated their vulnerability and sharing that part of them. And then lastly, another live coding vocal artist I want to shout out. I want to shout out to Kofi. And so actually, did I accidentally show? Oh no, I accidentally showed Kofi's work when I was talking about her to Abigail because the page wasn't loading. Okay, I'm sorry about that. That's not as nice as I like. I'm gonna move on. This is live. So Kofi, shout out to Kofi for incorporating poetry and to their work via typing, via speaking. I find their work really refreshing. And so, again, this ended up becoming more of a rose-colored glasses shout out edition, stream of consciousness than a formal talk. Maybe this is a listicle, I am not sure. I want to thank you all for your time and being here. And I'm also looking forward to hearing the other people speak. So thanks. And I am also the moderator. Hello. Okay. So with that in mind, all right, I would like to pass it on to Jonathan. So take it away.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Melody. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some work I've been doing with artificial voice over the last year or so, and then kind of ask some open questions about how vocal performance can sort of mix in and intertangle with live coding. So forgive me if there's not a whole lot of live coding at the beginning. I promise there will be some live coding eventually. Um, so yeah, hopefully everybody can see my slides. I've got kind of a weird OBS Frankenstein setup going on today. So if stuff is just not showing up, just like kind of give me a warning or something. Yeah, so my name's Jonathan. I'm a freelance artist, musician, performer, and recently PhD student at the University of Sussex. I also work with the Intelligent Instruments Lab in Reykjavik in Iceland. It's a really, really cool place with a lot of live coding people. Yeah, so first thing I would ask is how do we think about artificial voice as a kind of form of embodiment? Because we always talk about with uh, especially the musical side of live coding, you know, like what is the embodiment going on? Are we just like kind of floating brains, or are we part of bodies? And I think um, voice makes that even more kind of interesting, especially nowadays when you can work with very hyper realistic voices that are trained via machine learning models, or even with your own voice. So I would encourage everybody to just briefly indulge me and yeah, close your eyes and just listen to my voice. And my question is, to what kind of voice does this belong? So
Close your eyes. Listen to me voice.
Imagine this voice belongs to a body, one that is not mine.
Imagine if this voice belongs to a body, one that is not mine.
How is this? How tall is this body, and what shape is it? What shape is it? What does this body look like? How tall is this body? And how do you know your voice belongs to you? This year, I've been working on a year-long broadcast using artificial voices, supported by CTM Festival, Deutschland Tour, and ORF1. In this broadcast, I created a kind of real-time voice instrument that can synthesize text, but also transform voices into other voices, maybe even non-human voices. Here's a snippet.
We are not dying. We are not dying. We are not dying. Here, not today. We are.
So this is the transformation of the synthetic voice into an animal's voice. This is all done using machine learning on huge data sets of voice. So this is very interesting because we're using other voices for our own performance. So to try to challenge this a bit, throughout the year, we've done a number of workshops collectively making data sets where people voluntarily give their voices for performance.
You put the shat in shatters, you put the pain in Spain. You put the shed in shatter, or the pain in Spain.
But sometimes the models forget how to speak English.
Einert van die injury paying only stable out.
So my main question is how to bring these vocal techniques into live coding practice. Can live coding open up different kinds of vocal expressivities for artificial voices, embodiment, and identities? Listen.
Thanks. Those are the questions I have. And just one last thing before I go. There's a really incredible performance art space in Kumasi that's very much struggling right now. And they're trying to raise funds in order to keep their activities going. So if you, by any chance, can donate anything, please visit this website at pr.support, PIAR.support. And yeah, please give some support to them. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that presentation, Jonathan. That was great. It's really fascinated watching that work. We have about 1 minute left right now for questions. So I'm going to pop into the YouTube chat to see if there are any. In the meantime, something that I was like wondering is if there was any, if you all had a chance to make any artworks using this technology, or any pieces or sketches, or what part, yeah, like has anyone started making with this? I'm sorry, Jonathan, can you hear me?
Sorry, what did you say something? I couldn't.
No worries. A question that I had was, if anyone started creating artwork or sketches using the technologies you demonstrated, and if you could talk about them.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, these are all kind of like tools that I've been Frankensteining together as part of this radio broadcast project. So I'm just kind of now starting to experiment with how to yeah, use them in kind of more live situations. So yeah, not really. I think I'm just starting to kind of play with this stuff, and I'm occasionally doing some workshops where I slowly like kind of introduce a lot of this stuff to people.
I love the idea of a radio broadcast, using that for radio broadcasting. Have you tried doing anything with theater? That was like, it reminded me of a radio drama when you said that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's next year. I'm going to be working on a big theater project with artificial voice and probably robot masks. But like, let's see what happens.
Oh, yes. If you do that, please come again next year and keep us posted with everything.
For sure.
Amazing. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you again, Jonathan. That was wonderful. And so at this point, I think we're going to move on to our next presenter. And so next up, we have Alex McLean. When you're ready, take it away, please.
Thanks, Melody. And thanks for the presentation so far. I'm going to be live coding without anything apart from my voice, which is way out of my comfort zone. And I won't actually be sharing the code because it'd be in my head. But I'd really like it if you could see if you can imagine the code yourself and work out what it is I'm doing just by listening. Okay, I'm going to be using the numbers 1 to 5 in patterns. So let's try. I'll just set a timer. Right. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 3, 4. 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 3, 4. 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1. Okay. I think that's enough. Thank you. Yeah, I'm interested to know what you thought I did.
Interesting. So at this point, I should be asking you questions, but you just asked us a question.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I would, I started getting distracted, honestly, because I started philosophizing about what you were doing, if I'm really honest. There were lots of things that, like the beginning felt, especially clear to me with the 1, 2, 3, 4s.
Yeah.
But since I didn't really follow the process. I think I would rather just talk about what everything that this reminded me of.
Sure.
It reminded me of like classical contemporary percussion.
Mm-hmm.
Where, so that for reference, that's like my background, where that's like what I studied in undergrad. So this reminded me of some of the more theatrical body percussion pieces, or playing drum set, where you're separating, different limbs or parts of your body to keep track of time. And that's what I got for moments when you were clapping and then started to syncopate from yourself. So that's something that struck to me. I thought about process music, like Steve Reich, and like how this was simple music, where it was simple meaning in the way that we could clearly hear the layers, and it was easy to keep track of what was happening sonically and the transformations that was happening. So when you would speed up or slow down or syncopate. And then I also thought a bit about Indian talas, which I'm not quite as like familiar with, but some of the hand motions you were doing, and again, you were changing time between your voice and your hands. That's something that struck out to me. And so I guess that's, if I was going to ask a question, I was wondering if any of those references were in what you were doing. And also Kofi has some stuff seems to have added a thought.
Oh yeah. This reminded me of a January prompt, generative art without a computer, and shows the process of making patterns in a human thing. Yeah, I guess January must be something that happens in January, so I look forward to that next month. But yeah, totally. I've been really interested in South Indian rhythms and chronicle, and been trying to get into that. And so I guess this was sort of a exploration of that kind of thing as a total novice, but kind of introducing some pattern transformations that I enjoy exploring in with Tidal. But it's interesting kind of connecting fairly contemporary practice like Tidal with practice which is thousands of years old and actually much more developed. Seeing how something like South Indian Carnatic rhythms can actually really take live coding to the next level. I think if we really manage to bridge these different worlds, there's a lot to learn. But yeah, super interested in your background in percussion and the kinds of things that you've been doing, learning that. But yeah, maybe that's enough time for me, and we can talk about that another time. But yeah, thanks for that response. That was really nice and informative.
Right. I mean, thank you. Before we completely let you go, so my timer technically has 1 minute. I want to double check in the chat to make sure, to see if anyone else has like anything to add or questions. And so I do see some things in the chat. So I see something from High Harmonics. They said, I was thinking about how this would be done in Tidal. I could imagine the LC methods, how you were doing the changes. Algarve Club at UTC Sheffield said this. I could tell it was a pattern, but what was changing was difficult to tell what each transformation was, but well done. And High Harmonics, another one. I enjoy the polyrhythms, how you evolve them. So.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I guess there has been a project by I can't remember his name off the top, but yeah, sort of looking at Indian classical rhythms and how to represent them in Tidal. I'd say Aravind Mohandas did a summer Google of Code project this year, and the ultimate aim is to build that kind of stuff into Tidal. So at the moment, the kind of things I was doing would actually be hard to do in Tidal, adding and subtracting beats, because it's so cycle based without sort of messing with the tempo. It's quite hard to do. So yeah, at the moment, working on this whole extra bit of Tidal to try and make that kind of thing possible. Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Alex. That was wonderful. Okay. So moving on to our last presenter before our group Q&A section, I want to invite Jessica Garson. Hello.
Hi, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, thank you everybody for having me here. I'm going to talk a little bit about my practice. Mostly this is going to be a demo. So I got started with live coding about 5 years ago, pretty much exactly 5 years ago to the date, which is pretty exciting. And I started just making like traditional dance music, and that's not what I like. That's not what I listen to. And I was like, this doesn't feel like me. And so I met Kate, who's actually on this call, and we were talking about me playing a show for Live Code NYC. And I was like, I wonder if I can like make this sound more like me. And so the way that I found out to do it was that I would just sample myself screaming, and I knew nothing about sampling. I was in punk bands previously. As Melody mentioned earlier, I used to just like drag and drop files from Audacity into Sonic Pi. And actually, the funny thing about that is I actually ended up going pretty much in that same direction. I used a looping pedal. I would do saving to a buffer in Sonic Pi, and then none of them were perfect. And I actually wrote a Python script that basically mimics that Audacity process, and that's actually what I've been using today. But I was just gonna basically give a brief demo of what my process looks like with Scream samples and how I use it to kind of create this like dystopian, beautiful world that I can like entrap you in for a few minutes. So yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. All right, cool. And this is actually the scream.py script that I use typically if I'm doing live screams, but a lot of times, not every situation I want to scream, especially at 9:30 in the morning in a New York City apartment. So yeah, let's actually just make some music. I'm using Foxdot today, but I use everything from Tidal to Sonic Pi, but mostly Foxdot these days, just because it's easy to just use to drop in scream samples. that's a little bit about my process that I use these days. I've tried a lot of things for live sampling screams. I also like to layer pre-save scream samples on top of live samples. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions about my process. Also, Melody did mention that I have a album out, which I hate promoting, but Melody mentioned it, so I guess I'll promote it. And it's available anywhere that you listen to music. It's on Spotify and Bandcamp, and lots of other places. So, and I can also mail you a tape if that's something that you're interested in as well. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jess. That was great. Something that I would like to ask, you talked a lot about how, you developed this aesthetic, you wanted to try to sound more like you, and I'm curious how screaming sounds like you.
Yeah, so I used to be in punk bands, and the feedback that I would always get is that my vocals weren't quote unquote strong enough. They were always very squeaky. They sound like oscillators. And I think that that sounds awesome. And so I kind of got that feedback from a band that I was in once, and they were like, "Oh, we can make this work, but it's really squeaky, your vocals." And I was like, "That is awesome." I love my squeaky vocals. It doesn't work for every band, but when I scream, it sounds like oscillators, and I could get to really high pitched places. And I wanted a project that I could just kind of explore that. I've always listened to noise music. I kind of love that world. I really like kind of changing what live code could be. It doesn't have to be one genre. Algo rave isn't just a genre, it's a medium that ties us together. And so I just wanted to make something different. I wanted to make something that you've never heard before. I wanted to make you be like, whoa, what is that? And I also my favorite thing about writing code is that you get to create the world that you want to live in. And so I want it to be this beautiful dystopian place where you can create whatever you want to create. And that's kind of a lot of my work tends to play with the tension between creating something beautiful and wanting to destroy it. And so I will literally do that. I'll make a really pretty riff for you, and then I'll just destroy it with my own screams, and then reveal that really pretty layer is still there at the end of the day, and that it didn't go anywhere. It's just part of another thing that kind of will slowly build.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I can definitely get a sense of building, the world building that you're describing, from your sound choices to how you even how you develop visuals with your aesthetic. It's a very cohesive world. I know this is you if it pops up on my Spotify or Bandcamp without looking. So that's really great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm looking in the chat right now to see if there are other questions. We still have a bit of time for conversation if people wanted to ask anything.
Also, you mentioned visuals, and that's actually something that is a new thing for me. Ish, I think you were at the first show that I actually ever did visuals at, and I've been using Hydra. I actually just was gifted a analog video synth, so I'm really trying to develop that out a little bit more. But I tend to be more on the audio side, but I am playing my first few shows where I'm doing both. I did visuals once on an algorithm, and that was really fun. But I'm really trying to explore that and build my skills so I could create that same sort of world building with that.
Nice. I look forward to checking those out. That sounds really fun. I do see a question actually related to your gear, but I think you kind of just answered it now. It was a question about the editor setup and visualization.
Yeah. I use the Atom plugin for Hydra. I just find that I don't really use Atom for anything other than live coding, but I really like all the plugins that exist for title cycles and for Foxdot. And so I'm using the Atom plugin for Hydra is what I'm using. And then it kind of will continue to show the visuals even though it's in a different tab, which is pretty awesome. And I remember the first time that I realized how easy it was to make visuals and just have like my editor look awesome. And I was like, whoa, I could just do that. That's awesome. So yeah, that's a great question. I know that like I've seen people use like transparency and other things, and I've played with that, especially with Sonic Pi. I'll use like I have a different set that I recorded recently where I like just set the transparency on Sonic Pi to be nothing, and then I have like my editor underneath. So there's different things that you can do.
Thanks for that. Thank you for that tip. We have one last question because we do have some time. So this one is from, to clarify, actually, I'm sorry, I misread the question. And so we're going to pivot. You're still gonna be asked the question, but I would like to ask this question for everyone. And so at this point in the schedule, I would like to open this up to our group Q&A. So if the other participants could also turn on their cameras and join us, I'd like to ask this question in the chat. And so thank you. And so, yeah, thank you, Jess. And so bringing it back to everyone, someone asked Kofi more specifically, when it comes to using your voice in your code, do you think of the computer as an extension of your voice, or do you consider your voice an extension of the code? Does anyone want to answer this?
I can say something. Yeah, for me, it's neither nor. I think I feel like I'm in a kind of like cycle with the code where I'm like constantly consuming and producing at the same time, and the artificial voices I'm working with are kind of doing the same thing. Yeah, I don't feel like I don't feel like I have a tool that's like extending me. I feel like I'm kind of more in some sort of weird relationship with the tools. I don't know.
Oh, I love the idea of a weird relationship. I got like something romantic came to mind. It became really funny when you said that.
It's definitely very intimate.
Intimate, sometimes turmoil, sometimes big feelings. Does anyone else wanted to answer this question?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think I see the code as something that is someone just made a loud noise for me, but yeah, I see the code as something distant from me, and the voice is something very close and intrinsic. I think that's sort of the trade-off with code, is that it's far away from you, but that means that you can look at it, you can point at it and talk about it. It's explainable, whereas the voice, I think, is very close, tacit, and inexplicable. But then, as Jonathan says, sort of having it in this sort of feedback loop between this code, which is external but explicit language, and something like your voice, it's yeah, it's this weird relationship. Definitely, it's hard to talk about, but it's like the movement between the voice and the code is what is so generative and interesting. And it feels almost impossible to jump between these two different worlds, but somehow it works.
Yeah, I'm also like, there's also so much possibility. Like, Jonathan, your work was really inspiring to me around like how you can process the voice and like, how like, I don't know, it made me want to like work with more generative voice aspects in my own work and like kind of sample in some of that. And like, I don't know, I think that there's like a lot of possibility and being able to kind of like move between something that is so regimented to something that doesn't have to be is really kind of like, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the space. And I think like I'm really interested in seeing what other artists do within that kind of like center of that Venn diagram.
Thank you. Cool. Need to see if there's any other questions right now. Okay, we'll wait to see if more come up. I do have some questions. I guess something that I'm thinking about is like tips for people who are interested in trying to incorporate voice into their practice, or maybe like an insight, something surprising that you've all like learned along the way, like an unexpected lesson. I'm wondering if anyone has something they'd like to share.
I think in terms of like unexpected lessons, I think I expected the tools to be really easy for like, oh, like I could just sample my voice and that'll be really easy. And like, you know, it's gonna like take 5 minutes and I can probably do it in an afternoon and figure it out. And like, I'm still learning how to do that. You know, for a set that I'm playing, I have a analog looping pedal that like my code will also be getting through like my audio interface with like a delay chain, and then being able to kind of like capture both has kind of been like where I've been thinking, but like I'm still like learning how to do it. And so I think one of the things that has been really unexpected to me is just like how it's not necessarily straightforward. And I know that Nut Melody, you have your own practice too. You record into a buffer. I've tried doing that and it's fun, but it's not like 100% like couldn't get it to like save as long as I wanted and other things like that. And so I think there's just a lot of ways that you can do it, but it's also like I expected it to be really simple and easy to do, and it's still something that like 5 years later I'm still learning how to do it, and I'm still like mimicking the first thing that I did, which is like using Audacity and like dropping my file in, like I don't know. And you know, I haven't quite found like, you know, I know that like some programs you have the sound in function and you could sing along with your code, and there's other things. Melody, you definitely do that all the time. But I think that there's different ways that you can kind of like go about doing it, but also there's like a lot of like room for improvement. And I've been thinking about like creating tools in that space to make it just easier.
I could jump on that. Yeah, I have the exact same feeling as Jessica was saying. And I think it's more fundamental than voice. It's more about working with live instruments, and like especially live sampling is really difficult for some reason with live coding languages. It's like super easy with so many other softwares, but for some reason, you know, I mean, I've had to rebuild a live sampler so many times in Super Collider, and I still don't have one that works well. And I find this is like kind of the first thing I wanted to do with voice was just live sample myself and then like play with my voice in real time. So yeah, it is really interesting that we don't have like that isn't more developed for some reason, or that isn't, there aren't more sophisticated tools for doing that, or like a best practice approach or something like that yet. But maybe we come up with one, I don't know, or we start sharing our tools with each other and try to figure out what the best way of doing it is.
Yes, exciting when there's a untapped area. I have worked with something called the Tidal Looper, which is a Super Collider add-on by a guy whose name I can't remember, but his handle is Mr. Reason. And that's really fun to kind of granulate live sounds and use Tidal to manipulate that live. So it's like playing with samples, but the samples are continually changing. So you can have a pattern, a rhythmic structure based on the audio that's coming in, and then offset that with an effect, and it can get really wild really quickly. So it's and something like looping, I think, is I really like it actually, and it has a similar structure, I suppose, to a lot of live coding, in that you have this building up of layers and then dissipating. But I think when you bring together looping and live coding, you have so much sort of high level compositional control over what's happening that it can get into a very different place, I think, closer to granular synthesis, but where you're live chopping up these patterns and things. And I had a project during lockdown with my friend Ema, sponsored by Eclectic in London. You can probably find the video somewhere. And we were just at the start of that exploration, but there's lots to explore, I think. Yeah, exciting area.
Thank you for those answers. That's great. So I'm looking in the chat and I see that there are a few more questions. And so see a question for Alex. Does vocalizing the patterns change the pattern in your head, or does it match what you are thinking about? Yes.
So in terms of that performance I did, it was based on a practice called Conical, based on, I forgot to mention this earlier, so normally you do it with the syllables of the Mrindangam drum, and I'm just learning like the basics of the rhythmic patterns, but look up Conical if you're interested in that. In what conical musicians do is absolutely incredible. But yeah, in terms of vocalizing the patterns, changing the patterns in my head, I guess it feels like, something. It's the first time I've tried it, but it feels like it's all part of the same. It doesn't feel as distant as it does like with code. It feels much more like intuitive, and I find sometimes I lose control and I just start repeating numbers without any order, but somehow it all comes out in some kind of structure. So it's almost like my voice takes over. Does the patterns change the patterns? Yeah, I think having the voice continually speaking has a strong influence on the pattern in my head, but I suppose there isn't really a difference. Like the pattern in my head is what I'm vocalizing, and I'm trying to imagine what to do next, but it just kind of happens really. I think that's quite a vague way of answering that, but there's more of an open question for everyone. How does sampling the voice change the voice in your head? So I'll offer that to Jessica and Jonathan.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely something that, like, I don't know. One of the things I just did in the performance that I gave for y'all was that I changed the rate and I can make my voice way deeper. I can make it sound like an elephant. I can and like I've never thought of myself as like sounding like an elephant, particularly. So like there's just a lot of possibilities, like especially when you start adding on effects. If you start like layering it more, you can make it sound like a car alarm, which is like one of my favorite parts to get to. There's just like a lot that you can do, and just like every so often, like I actually in my car yesterday, I was listening to my own album because I hadn't done it like in full since I put it out there into the world, and I was like, oh, I haven't like listened to this as like a piece of music in a long time. Like I should just like make sure that it sounds. And there were a couple of moments where I was like, that's me. Like, I don't sound anything like that. What? Like, that's my voice. What is that? And I think like that's one of the beautiful things about code is that you can make it sound however you want it to make it sound. And then, so I don't know. I think that that's interesting. Jonathan, I'm interested in hearing from you because I think your work's so interesting in the fact that like it kind of takes voices and literally turns them into something else.
It's an interesting question. Also, does the voice change your voice in your head? I just think about what is the voice in my head, and I don't know if it really has like a tonality or a character. It's somehow like a bodiless voice, and I feel like with the voice transformations I'm doing, a lot of it has to do with kind of changing my own experience of my body. At least for me, that's what's exciting about it, is that I feel like I have a new part of my body, or a new body almost, because I enter in this kind of relationship with like a different sound that's coming out of my mouth. And sometimes that, yeah, I guess it does have like a kind of a theater sort of quality to it, like you're putting on a mask and becoming a different person, or a different something. It could even be like a non-human. And I think that's kind of what I try to do. Like when I get really excited about what I'm doing, is when I feel like I'm something else. And that can be really empowering. And yeah, like this kind of shift between controlling kind of these vocal models with patterns versus controlling them with my own voice, it's a very weird feeling. And I feel like there's some kind of very strange friction between vocalizing and writing code. And I think Alex maybe touched on it a bit, with this code being like kind of an external thing and voice being kind of an internalized thing. But that's kind of like sort of the challenge I'm facing, or maybe not challenge, but just like the kind of question. That's why I was asking about, like, do we even have like the bandwidth to juggle all of these different kind of flows? And borrowing words from Kofi, but I really like the idea of thinking about this in terms of flows. How do you like manage all of these different things in like the situation of live coding? Because I think that's also why there's not a lot of very good live sampling stuff going on in tools in live coding, because you want to be able to just do it very intuitively with another part of your body, not with usually your fingers are busy, or your brain is somewhere else, and there's a quite a sort of focused energy that I think is required to sort of detour and go to writing some code. So yeah, I think like trying to create this kind of flow where the coding and the performativity can kind of dance with each other in a more fluid way. I think that's kind of what I'm like trying to figure out now. I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry, I'm happy to talk with you later about stuff that I didn't answer properly.
That was wonderful. This has been a wonderful conversation and session. At this point, we need to wrap up. But I want to thank you all again for presenting. Big thanks to our presenters for your insightful talks. And so we're going to conclude this session. Next up, our next session is on embodiment and movement. Go to the next YouTube stream. Okay, thank you all again. Bye-bye.